You will or will not agree with me that at the end of the colonial project, the colonial masters, whoever they were, had an architecture that was designed to protect their interest in the former colonies. And despite whatever it is that you want to say, it cannot be denied that institutions such as the Commonwealth are in this category. Their pretensions notwithstanding. Of course, when you look at the Commonwealth and its goals, it says that it talks about the rule of law, it talks about democracy, it boasts that the Commonwealth countries have a GDP combined of 13 trillion and that is bigger than the Eurozone. That is the veneer that we see. But if you look at the psychology of the Commonwealth, and not only the Commonwealth, but the organization that puts the former French colonies together, and even the one that brings together the former Portuguese colonies, the agenda is one, that these are neo-colonial organizations whose agenda is to give the former colonial powers the feeling that they still control their empire. So that I want to imagine for myself that when the British are sitting alone in the absence of all these former colonies, they thump their chests and says, we are still in control. And that is why, for example, it is headquartered in the United Kingdom, in London, I think. If it were that it was an organization of equal states, and you are to go by the countries that are members, you would have it outside of the United Kingdom. If it were true that it was an organization that brings in sovereign states of equal status, it would not be the case that the monarch of the British is the head of the Commonwealth. And it is us in the continent of Africa particularly to blame for the continued existence of these organizations. If the African countries were organized regionally as East Africa, as South Africa, as ECOWAS, as Central Africa, as the Maghreb, and our organization were thorough and proper, and if we were organized continentally as the African Union, we would not need bodies such as the Commonwealth. We would be dealing with them as African Union. We would be dealing with them as East African Community. And this nostalgia that we appear to have that we must be members of the Commonwealth, so that when Zimbabwe, for example, is expelled from the Commonwealth, it becomes a big issue. And the possible return of Zimbabwe to the Commonwealth is seen as something that is great, a great achievement. These are things that underline our inferiority complex as a people. And the sooner we realize that, the safer we are. And therefore, I must say that this is the time when Africa must interrogate herself, interrogate our institutions, and ask ourselves very uncomfortable questions. You can see already now that there is a new scramble for Africa. You see, the Chinese are here scrambling for Africa. The Americans are here scrambling for Africa. The British, after the Brexit, are a lot more active in the continent of Africa. The Arabs are here scrambling for Africa. Even the Turks, the old Ottoman Empire, is beginning to reemerge. And we are welcoming them all. Not that it is wrong to welcome them, but we forget that some of their apparently well-intentioned activities are essentially in the nature of a Trojan horse. They are coming into our arena, and before we know it, they'll control our affairs. We may continue to have our elections, we may continue to elect our black heads of states and government, but in truth, the real power will rest elsewhere. And that is why I think that we as Africans have an opportunity now to ask ourselves the fundamental question that I've talked about. Otherwise, as I've said, and I repeat again, in the next 25 years, the continent of Africa will be recolonized. This time round, the colonization will be a lot more subtle. They will not bring in their administrators. The administrators will be our own. They'll divide us, and indeed, as indeed they're already dividing us along ethnic lines. And once they have created ethnic animosity amongst us, it will be very easy to manipulate and control us. So my submission to this conversation is, let us strengthen our institutions. I was very disappointed myself when sanctions are levied against Zimbabwe. It is the people who suffer. Those in positions of political power never suffer when they are sanctioned. I would have expected SADC to rally around Zimbabwe, to cushion Zimbabwe and Zimbabweans against the pain that was visited against them through the sanctions. I would have expected African Union to do the same. But what did we see, and what do we see? Tails between our legs. We leave Zimbabwe to the vagaries of the manipulation of foreign countries, and we do nothing as our kith and kin in Zimbabwe are suffering and laboring under economic sanctions. We must wake up. If we don't wake up, we will be eaten. This world is still governed by the law of the jungle, the dying of the least suitable and survival of the fittest. You know, if you look at Africa, even what we have as armies really don't count for much, because all the weapons that we use are imported, and most of them are second-hand arms. And that is why nobody fears nor respects us. Look at little North Korea. The reason why it is feared, it is because it can defend itself. African countries can't defend themselves. Today, if the Americans were to station one warship in the Mediterranean, one in the Indian Ocean, one in the Atlantic Ocean, it can decimate the entire Africa within one day. That is how weak we are. And the truth is, we must become strong before we are respected. And that strength, unfortunately, will have to be militarily strong, will have to be economically, and then, of course, politically. That is what we must do. Otherwise, we'll still have nostalgia for neo-colonial institutions such as the Commonwealth. Thank you.